Right, let's start. Hello, everyone. Salam, namaste, adab, and welcome to today's event. Today we have, India's very senior diplomat, Ambassador Shivshankar Menon, as the chief speaker. He is the former National Security Advisor, Foreign Secretary, and Ambassador to many countries. He will be formally introduced by Ambassador Ishrat Aziz Saab, who was Ambassador to UAE, Saudi Arabia, Brazil, and Tunisia. And he's the author, and he was teaching English at Aligarh Muslim University before joining the Indian Foreign Service. And the concluding remarks will be given by Ambassador K.P. Fabian, who used to be ambassador of Finland, Qatar, Italy, and permanent representative to UN in Rome. So we have three very distinguished and senior diplomats from India. And so welcome you all. And now I invite Ambassador Ishrat Aziz Saab for the formal introductory remarks.
Thank you. It is with real feeling of pleasure and sincere sense of privilege that I introduce my erstwhile colleague in the Foreign Service, Shivshankar Menon. To the audience of Indian diaspora, Washington. I cannot think of a better choice from our diplomatic service to do justice to the topic of today's talk. That is India's relations with its neighbors by virtue of his knowledge, experience, and insights. He has served as ambassador to China and also as High Commissioner to Sri Lanka and Pakistan. He has also served as ambassador to Israel. Before his ambassadorial assignments, he served as a diplomat in Vienna and also as deputy chief of mission in Japan. He has the unique distinction of having done 3 postings in China. First as a language training, then in a senior position as counselor, and then finally as ambassador. He capped his very distinguished career as foreign secretary. Under the scheme of things in the Ministry of External Affairs, foreign secretary's special focus of attention is relations with neighbors. Within a few months of his retirement from the service in 2009, Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh decided to tap his diplomatic experience and acumen in country's interest and appointed him as National Security Advisor, an office that he held for more than 4 years. His position as National Security Advisor gave him the unique vantage point to observe and understand the interactive relationship between internal social peace and unity, political stability, and economic strength between foreign policy, and internal situation. So, as I said, he is uniquely equipped to speak on the subject of India's relations with neighbors. There is always a very close relationship between what happens internally and foreign policy, especially with reference to the neighboring countries like Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Nepal, and now also Bangladesh. So, as I said, he is uniquely equipped to talk about this very, very important subject, because no country which does not have strong and friendly ties with its neighbors can fully attain its global stature, and that applies to India. Let me end this very brief introduction on a personal note. Shiv and I have lived in the same house in San Francisco, though not at the same time. His father, Ambassador N.P. Menon, was Consul General of India in San Francisco from 62 to 65, and he lived in the Consul General's residence in St. Francis Woods on 15 Junipero Serra Boulevard. Considering his date of birth, Shiv must have been a teenager, or must have been in his early teens at that time. 14 years later, in 1979, I went to San Francisco as India's Consul General and lived in that very house. By then, Shiv had joined Foreign Service in 1972. Thank you. And like everyone else, I look forward to his insights about our relations with neighbors.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Shivshankar, for that very kind introduction. Good of you, and thank you, Rajiv, for inviting me and asking me to speak to you and your group on a topic that I think is increasingly significant for India and our hope for India's future, namely India and her neighbors. Because as Ambassador Aziz said just now, we need a peaceful periphery and a friendly neighborhood in our own interest if we are to transform India into the India of our dream. What I thought I'd do is to speak a little bit about the geopolitics of the subcontinent of South Asia, and frankly speak about why both people in India and people in our neighboring countries feel that the relationships are less than satisfactory. And then to speak about what the present condition is of our neighborhood and what we might do about it as India. This South Asia is an interesting thing. We're the only subcontinent on Earth, which gives you a sense both of that South Asia or the subcontinent is a geopolitical unit in its own, but it's also connected to the rest of Asia. It's basically geographically, it's only bounded on the north by the Himalayas, which were both geographic, cultural, political boundary. between what lies north and south, but east and west and through the Indian Ocean, actually, South Asia has always been open to the world. And for a greater part of history, our prosperity, our security have been dependent more so on the maritime than on the continental order. And therefore, South Asia or the subcontinent has been part of a larger multiverse, connected with but separate from the universes of the Levant, Persian Gulf, from Central Asia and Persia, from Southeast Asian maritime kingdom, and Northeast Asia centered on China. This connected geography means that the security of the subcontinent is best thought of as a series of concentric and overlapping circles. And what happens in Southeast Asia, East Asia, West Asia directly affects the security of the subcontinent. The other geopolitical consequence of this open geography is really our linked fates and our open societies within the subcontinent. South Asia in the last century has been partitioned 5 times, and state boundaries are really new, recently defined, and frankly, the ethnicities, the languages, the religions, the cultures are much more ancient, and they don't match the state boundaries at all. There's a shared history of openness to each other. Every Southern Asian country has cross-border ethnicities and shares deep religious and strong linguistic, ethnic, and cultural attitude. And paradoxically, that same affinity across formal state boundaries is one reason why nationalism is high, but nationhood is still a work in progress, because the states are relatively new. These are ancient nations, but new states. Bhutan, the Maldives are exceptions in their relative homogeneity in ethnic, religious, linguistic terms. India and Afghanistan are the other extreme, where every group is a minority in terms of either language, religion, region, ethnicity. India therefore chose originally to base her nationalism not on a common religion or ethnicity or language or an enemy, but on an idea of India. But this varies. The paradox is that given weak state structures and porous borders, smuggling often exceeds formal trade, and large-scale migration for economic and other reasons is common throughout the subcontinent. And so, to my mind, there are really 2 reasons why both sides, in fact, all sides, are unhappy with the state of relations in our neighborhood. There are both structural, I think 2 structural reasons, and some contingent factors. The structural reasons are, as I just said, one, that they are new states with old nations. China is a neighbor which is a case apart. It's outside the subcontinent, and it's something we talk about separately. And there's not much we can do about it. Because state formation is an ongoing process, it's hard to think of another subregion or part of the world where its internal and external borders have changed more often than the Indian subcontinent in the last century. And as these newly independent states are being created, each one therefore tries to build a sense of nationalism following 19th century European means. And each of them, they seek to manufacture ethnic solidarity, they seek glorious, mythical past, they find and other external enemies, and they follow divisive or polarized internal politics. And none of this actually contributes to a cooperative relationship in the region. And these are efforts at nation building, at state building, which are undertaken against the grain of the land, the history, the geography, the culture, the language, etc. So it makes for very sensitive and touchy nationalist reactions. The process, therefore, has taken many forms. The most extreme is probably in Pakistan, whose identity is to be propagated almost entirely in opposition to India and on the basis of religion. There's a story told by the Pakistanis, I don't know if it's true, but Ziaul Haq was asked when he imposed Nizami Mustafa and Islamization, why are you doing this? And he said, if a Turk stops being a Muslim, he's still a Turk. But if a Pakistani stops being a Muslim, he's an Indian. So there is an identity issue there. But so state consolidation, national identity formation are still works in progress. But it takes different forms in different places. In Bangladesh, for instance, he has a separate, rich cultural heritage, Bengali identity, and political parties with mass support. And the Bangladesh army is not the Pakistan army. So it's actually prevented Bangladesh from so far from going the Pakistani way. Sri Lanka, Nepal have actually emerged more democratic and stronger in many ways from extended civil wars. Myanmar is probably the most challenged, while the Maldives is still trying to institutionalize democracy. The other structural factor is India's preponderance in terms of size of the economy, population, and power. And that provokes our neighbors into external balancing. They look for outside balancers to the great impact that India has on them. From their point of view, India is an overwhelming presence with 75% of the population of South Asia, 79% of the GDP, and 75% of the land area south of South Asia. So, and its geographic centrality, because most of them can only communicate with each other across land through India. So that overwhelming Indian presence, and as India's power has risen, as India has grown and developed over time, their need to balance India by bringing in outside powers. Originally it used to be the US, now it's China. As long as India-China relations were relatively trouble-free or smooth, this is not a cause for major concern. But today, now that they're not, now that India-China relations are stressed, both Delhi and Beijing seek to maximize their influence and increasingly rub up against each other. So most Indians will say, then what can we do about our sides? We can't change. Now, certainly we can't do much about our sides, but we can be more mindful of our neighbors' sensitivities. My favorite example is when Indians say to a Nepalese, well-meaning Indians say, "Aapko bilkul hamare jaisa hai." We mean it fraternally, but for the Nepalese, we've just swallowed his whole identity. And I don't think and then when domestic politics gets into it, and we get Indian leaders calling people from a neighboring country termites and so on, then actually, frankly, you see where the source of the dissatisfaction with the relationship is. But the fact is that I cannot think of another region where the actual cultural, linguistic, other affinities, and even now increasingly the economic incentives are stronger than in our neighborhood. Besides, what happens in each of these states affects our security, our prosperity directly, much more our security. And it's in our interest, therefore, to have a peaceful territory and to do what we can to make sure that that territory stays peaceful and that it works for us. How has South Asia done as a whole? It's an interesting problem because for large portions of South Asia, the arc of history is actually bending towards the left. A higher proportion of Indians, Bangladeshis, Sri Lankans than ever in history are living longer, healthier, and more prosperous lives. This may not be true of Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Myanmar. Paradoxically, though, inequality is growing between and within all South Asian societies. But the real problem is that Adam Tooze, for instance, calls our present situation in South Asia a polycrisis, because many of our neighbors are still reworking or have yet to settle their internal political order and their social contract, or to find an appropriate role in the world, whether it's Pakistan, Nepal, Myanmar, Afghanistan. And their politics is increasingly fraught, and not just in the economically challenged. Uh, so we are in the middle of a really painful economic, political, social, and ideological transformation. At least 4 of our countries are discussing or in adjustment programs with the IMF. Sri Lanka actually defaulted in 2022. And about, by my count, 8 governments have changed in South Asia since 2022. Not all of them constitutionally or happily. And political lines are being redrawn everywhere. While Sri Lanka seems to be recovering from crisis, as we did 2 weeks ago, but not everyone else is as fortunate. What makes this crisis, this poly crisis in South Asia, more worrying and different from past such crises is that it's occurring when there's a major phase transformation underway in the international system as well. When the world system is undergoing a fundamental change, when uncertainty, conflict, and displacement in the international system are higher than ever since World War II. And the tremendous imbalance in power that supported a Western-led order after World War II no longer exists. And frankly, there's very little prospect of another world order to replace it. During the Cold War, NATO and the Warsaw Pact accounted for over 80% of world military power and GDP. Today, absent effective alliances, which have gone, the 2 largest powers, the US and China, account for less than 50% of world GDP and about the same proportion of world military power. Power is today much more evenly distributed in the world today. And this is now a much more disorderly world. In effect, we're returning to the historical norm. The world orders are the exception rather than the rule. And you can see unilateral military interventions, flouting of international law and norms, which have become common in the last few decades. Wherever you look, whether it's Afghanistan, Iraq, Serbia, Georgia, Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, South China Sea, Himalayas, Iran, bombing, Yemen, Ukraine, Congo, Armenia, each place, everyone is trying, this goes longer. People are trying their luck. So one consequence of this phase transformation in international system is that multilateralism as we knew it is dead. There has not been a binding international agreement on an issue of real consequence for over a decade and a half. And organizations like the UN, formed of member states, can hardly be effective when member states are quarreling among themselves. So if we are to deal with our problem in South Asia, we have to deal with them ourselves. You can't look to the international system or the order, the multilateral system for solutions to our problems. And certainly not for any transnational problems. When you look at problems of debt and so on, these are not going to be solved by the international system. India has 2 other particular issues in the neighborhood, which I think are much higher priority. The highest, of course, is China in South Asia, the elephant in the room. This is a result both of China's expanding power and need for a peaceful periphery of her own. And her periphery happens to also be our periphery. So we rub up against each other in the periphery. And as our interests have grown, we also rub up against China. We, for instance, today 38% of our foreign trade goes through the South China Sea and the Taiwan Strait. So, and for China, that's a very sensitive area. They think this is India interfering in what's their area, their territory. We see what China does in South Asia, offering to, for instance, broker peace between Myanmar and Bangladesh on the Rohingya issue, and willing to play a political role, working to keep the Nepalese communist parties together, the Maoists and the UNL, making clear her support for the Rajapaksas in Sri Lanka, in Sri Lankan politics. This is a new, and spending much larger amounts of money in the neighborhood, in our neighborhood, than she's ever done before. $62 billion is what she promised Pakistan for the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor in 2015 when he visited, which is a huge investment. It's actually the single biggest BRI project that there is. So, and increasingly, there's the push from China as China rises, as she defines her interests in broader and broader terms. There's also the pull from our neighbor, who see China's pledges under the Belt and Road as being useful to them. And these are huge. If you look at the total BRI pledges by China in South Asia, it's over $100 billion in investment and loans, mostly loans, frankly. As I said, 60 billion to Pakistan, 30 billion to Bangladesh, 11 billion to Sri Lanka, and about 1.5 billion to Maldives. In trade, India is still the largest trading partner for Sri Lanka, Nepal, and Bhutan. And in Bangladesh, we keep switching places with China. But as China-US contention gets more acute, South Asia has joined, not still at the same level, but it's joined Northeast and Southeast Asia as becoming an area of Chinese strategic effort. As in the rest of maritime Asia, China's tried to increase her role and so on. For there is, I think, two parts of it that actually cause us concern in India. One is the weaponization of our economic leverage by China. Sri Lanka shows both the limits and the potential uses of this leverage. If you look at Colombo Port, for instance, most of it, the recent expansion in the last 20 years, most of it has been done by Chinese money and Chinese companies and Chinese effort. And yet, the port itself is open to everybody. 86% or so of what goes through Colombo Port is to or from India. And it's interestingly, therefore, we get the use of an efficient port. The port is in a position to pay back the loans to China. And it's a growing commercial concern. And frankly, that doesn't bother any of us. I mean, but she also spent $1.2 billion on building a port in Hambantota, which was Rajapaksa's home, Mahinda Rajapaksa's home. But that port doesn't have any business. And at some stage, frankly, we therefore worry about, is this port meant to serve a strategic purpose, military purpose, or is it actually going to do, or will it actually just be a loss and if not? It's hard to tell, because today it's very hard to see how. So the other problem, of course, is China's consistent support to Pakistan. China has helped Pakistan to first become a nuclear weapon state and has helped her missile program and has made sure over the decades to keep Pakistan one step behind India. Every advance we make, the Chinese keep the Pakistanis, update the Pakistanis to one step behind us. And that actually makes the Pakistan problem, which in itself is not something that we cannot handle or live with, but it makes it actually a much harder problem for all of us to deal with. With Pakistan, of course, part of the problem is that Pakistan is as much a domestic political issue in India, and India is a domestic political issue in Pakistan. I used to like to say that India got its independence from the British, but the Pakistanis got their independence from India. And that actually has poisoned the relationship throughout. But I do want to make a distinction. Pakistan is still an unformed or unfinished polity. And there's large parts of Pakistan which are not intrinsically hostile to India. Apart from the Jihadi Tanzeems and the Pakistani army, which has an institutional interest in an antagonistic relationship with India. Frankly, the Pakistani civilian politician, the Pakistani businessman, the ordinary Pakistani citizen has nothing against India and is quite happy to see better relations and a good normal relationship with India. So we are actually, our problem is we're dealing with many Pakistan. And this makes for inconsistent policy. Unfortunately, the process of domestic politics in both our countries has now led us to a very strange equilibrium, where it suits the domestic political interests on both sides to have a managed adversarial relationship. Managed. They don't want it to get out of hand, but they do want to have an enemy who they can then project at home as being the target of their successful policy. It justifies the Pakistani army's role in Pakistan and its continuing hold on Pakistan's economy and polity. And it also is used for domestic political purposes in India. And this makes the problem much harder to solve, because it's not a problem, therefore, which can easily be settled when you can't disentangle it from domestic politics. So we have, therefore, in our neighborhood, for me, the biggest challenge is, of course, the China challenge. And the phenomenal rise of China in the last 4 decades. It's really quite amazing. But don't assume that everything is easy going for China. China's neighbors do to China exactly what India's neighbors do to India. As you see in Vietnam and South Korea, the Philippines, Australia, and the others. And China actually faces a dilemma because China is an economic superpower. But in military terms and political terms, she's actually a regional power. A growing regional power, but still a regional power. And we saw this when Iran was a neighbor, actually, almost a neighbor of China. When Iran was attacked and bombed, there's only so much that China can do about what happens in her own periphery. We've seen the limits of Chinese power in Afghanistan, for instance. When the Taliban took over, Beijing offered aid and development in exchange for Taliban guarantees of peace and security, and they were asked to take action against ETIM, the Turkestan Independent Movement, who the Chinese regard as terrorists. The Taliban have done nothing credible against them so far. They've taken the aid, they've taken the assistance, and frankly, there are limits. Therefore, also China has. Geography itself poses some challenges to China. In the Indian Ocean, for instance, for China to operate in the Indian Ocean means that they have to travel over 3,000 nautical miles from bases in China, transit through the first island chain, which is entirely dominated by the US and her allies, and the US actually has bases throughout that area, and through straits which are very carefully monitored. And then she has to deal with naval acquisitions and established powers who push back against what she's doing. For us, it's really the expanding Chinese footprint in South Asia, in the Indian Ocean region, which has considerable implications. But there are ways of dealing with this. If we work with others, use China's own limitations and challenges, and actually work with China itself. Those two challenges, the Pakistan challenge, as I said, is in many ways a subset of our China challenge. And some of it depends on the relationship that we're able to work up with China. What about South Asia or the subcontinent? For me, frankly, I believe that this poly-crisis in South Asia that we see, whether it's the crisis in Bangladesh, whether it's in Nepal, Sri Lanka, all this could be a moment of geopolitical and economic opportunity for India and the neighborhood. Why? Because, frankly, as Churchill once said, you should never let a good crisis go to waste. Because a crisis enables you to do things that you find very difficult to do in a normal time. We did that in India in 1991, when we faced an existential balance of payments crisis, and we changed our economic trajectory fundamentally. We made big changes, which people had known for years was necessary, but we weren't able to do in the normal course of things. We did the same with Sri Lanka when we negotiated our free trade agreement with Sri Lanka in the midst of a crucial phase in the civil war in 1997-2000. For me, this is the time when we in South Asia should actually be cooperating among ourselves to deal with the present economic and security crisis that we face in the neighborhood. Now is the time to put into place the habits, the institutions of cooperation, whether in currency and finance, or in trade, or in economic coordination, or in connectivity, which would enable us to ride out and bear external shocks like the ones we all experienced with COVID, when external markets for our exports collapsed and income from remittances and tourism also collapsed. So we should be looking at payment arrangements, at economic integration and opening among ourselves, and we should find ways of ensuring the common security in the subcontinent that is necessary if we are to realize our economic promise and grow. We should be installing the connectivity that we so lack. And nobody else is going to do this for us. So unless we do it, we should revive our regional cooperation institutions like SAARC and not allow bilateral politics at home, internal politics at home, to stymie those who are ready to work together. This opportunity actually arises from, as I said, the fact that we in South Asia have more affinities than I think any other sub-region in the world. And yet we may well be one of the least integrated regions, sub-regions in the world. Only 6% of our trade is with one another. Our own investment in our own region is minuscule, and we all know how bad connectivity is. And we seldom act together in defense of our common interests on the international stage. So this combination of affinity with minimal integration actually creates great potential and promise for regional cooperation. And now is the time for us to do it. The more the uncertainty in the global system, the higher the priority that we should accord to stabilizing and managing our immediate periphery. For India, if we want a peaceful periphery with which we get on, and to keep it free to the extent possible, free of our antagonistic outside influences, we need to first connect and economically integrate with our own neighborhood. The World Bank estimates that with the right steps, India's trade in goods with South Asia could amount to $62 billion instead of the $19 billion that it was just before COVID. Besides, some of us in the Global South now have the means to do much more with each other. And so that naturally needs leadership of a very high order. It requires leaders with vision and unity of purpose. If we want to lead, we must behave as leaders. Basically, we cannot prosper alone in a subcontinent that is falling apart when the world itself is adrift and the future of the world economy also is at question and globalization is being redefined. So therefore, I think that we have an opportunity today if we approach the neighborhood with the right attitude. Our goal should be for India to be seen in the neighborhood as a source of prosperity and security. And we can, I think, consider much more ambitious ways. What we did with Sri Lanka after she defaulted in 2022 April actually provided a way. Because Sri Lanka then approached the IMF and those who she owed her debts to, 20% to China, some of it to the World Bank and IMF, to Western creditors, and they couldn't agree on what to do. In fact, Sri Lanka didn't see a penny of international money for the next two and a half years almost. because the West didn't see why they should give Sri Lanka money to pay back the Chinese. And the Chinese didn't see why they should pay back the money, because if they did, if they gave Sri Lanka the write-offs or the deferred payments, then the other $1 trillion which they'd given to other countries under BRI across the third world, they would all come saying, give us the same terms. They also have a debt crisis. And we therefore helped Sri Lanka to tide over her problem, and it stood us in very good stead. The JVP government, which has now come to power in Sri Lanka, traditionally the JVP were actually very opposed to India and the links with India. In fact, but their first visit abroad was to India. So for me, the crisis offers an opportunity, and I am an optimist about where we can go in South Asia if we work together with our neighbors. And because of the chaos in the world, I don't have to say how difficult now the broader relationships are for India in the world, and how actually dark the prospects are for the world economy as a whole. In that situation, it really makes sense. It would make sense for us to do much more. And the subcontinent's geopolitics obviously will hot up with the rest of the world, but I'm an optimist that we can find solutions. I'll stop there, and I'd be very happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Wonderful. So let us just first do the concluding remarks, and after that we have the question and answers. So we invite Ambassador Fabian for brief concluding remarks. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, dear friend Riaz. Dear friends Ishrat and Shankar, and friends in Washington and elsewhere. It is indeed a privilege to be with all of you. I have been listening, as you too have been listening very carefully to Shankar, and I should say that I agree with all that has been said. I just wanted to share a few random thoughts. Well, as Ishrat has said earlier, good foreign policy implies good relations with neighbors. It is not only a question of India's standing in the world. No, good foreign policy in all respects implies good relations with neighbors. Now, one thing I noticed, and I was very glad to notice, and that is course correction on the part of India in regard to Maldives. As we all know, when the new president got elected there, he asked India to withdraw the 80 and odd military personnel, and India took a lot of time. And then President Muizu wanted to visit India as his first foreign visit. Well, the Indian protocol could not find a time. And then, of course, he went to China. But anyway, later, India did course correction. EAM Jaishankar went and spent 3 days in Maldives, and now things are better and normal, and things are how they should be. So that is an important thing, and I personally feel a bit of course correction is called for in the case of Bangladesh too, because India knew that that election which Sheikh Hasina won was rigged, and India could have told her privately, confidentially, that things were going wrong and something had to be done. I do not know, but I do not think India did it. So course correction is called for, even in regard to Bangladesh. Now, about Pakistan, well, I find it rather distressing that when Pakistan is in difficulties, economically or otherwise, sometimes in the Indian media there is, what shall I say, Schadenfreude, malicious pleasure. Now, this should stop. Doesn't make any sense. We cannot proclaim Vasudevaka Kudumbakam and then derive pleasure from our neighbors' difficulties. And another thing is that this no talks while terror is still there. Well, I take it as a slogan and not as policy, because I don't think it works. And recently, the defense minister of India spoke about India's ability to split Pakistan into 4 parts. Well, I consider it absolutely unnecessary, to put it mildly. And he also said that nuclear weapons in Pakistan are dangerous, and IAEA should take over the weapons. Obviously, I don't think he had the time to read the charter of the IAEA. So I think, there is much scope for improvement in all those things. Now, let me make a distinction between foreign policy and diplomacy. Foreign policy is the overall framework. That is, we figure out where India stands now, say 2025, and where India should be in, say, 2030. Now, many people in India talk about 2047. Well, that is important, but I'm being selfish. I do not expect to be there in 2047. So I prefer to speak of, the next 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. So let's focus again. You take India-Pakistan relations now, 2025. What should they be in 2030? Now, I doubt, though I should be glad to be proved wrong, I doubt whether Joint Secretary dealing with Pakistan has a clear idea as to what India-Pakistan relations should be in 2030. Now, I said we should make a distinction between foreign policy and diplomacy. Now, foreign policy is something, where the PMO has much to say. Well, not only the PMO, but the PMO has a predominant role. Diplomacy is day-to-day relations, and that should be left to MEA. And that is not always the case. And I should recall that in 1990-91, when we had that evacuation from Iraq and Kuwait, well, we kept the PMO posted, but there was never any interference. Now, another point I want to deal with is, America is always there. Now, recently, President Trump said that India might be able to buy oil from Pakistan. Well, to my mind, why not? If 5 years hence, because, exploration and all that will take time. If Pakistan has a lot of oil, they can buy it. But the reaction in India was so, what shall I say, angry. So in other words, India should learn how to look at Pakistan with a certain equanimity. Now, since I mentioned Trump, did India handle the mercurial Trump skillfully? No. In fact, there is so much talk about Sindoor in India. Now, the thing is this, it is true there was no mediation because, India did not ask for mediation. But nevertheless, it looks as though again, I shall be glad to be corrected, that America did push Pakistan into asking for a ceasefire. And Delhi could have very well thanked America for pushing Pakistan in the right direction. And when Pakistan DGMO asked for the ceasefire, MEA could have immediately come out with a statement. Pakistan has asked for ceasefire, we are considering it. If MEA had done that, then perhaps Trump would not have had a chance to say that, he would not have been the first to announce the ceasefire, nor claim that there was mediation. Though, frankly, I should say that, the mediation part he would have claimed because he wants a Nobel Peace Prize. Anyway, I don't want to talk more about that. Now, if you want to talk about India, America, then and Trump, we need another seminar. Now, just about China, Shankar has spoken much in detail. My comment is that, it is rather tricky waters, but I'm sure Indian diplomacy will be able to navigate with safety. Basically, China looks at India as the younger sister who should treat the elder one with respect and be obedient. And of course, China wants to be the hegemon in Asia first, and China feels that India is standing in the way. So that again will need another seminar. Now, just last point, that is about SARC. Shankar is absolutely right when he pointed out the importance of cooperation in South Asia. Now, the point I want to make is that I don't see any sign of SARC getting revived with Delhi taking the initiative. In fact, I personally believe that the refusal to attend the summit in Islamabad after a terrorist attack which originated from Pakistan was the wrong decision. Because, as I said earlier, the slogan, no talks, and you cannot mix talks and terror. No, as I said, it's only a slogan, it's not a policy. Actually, India should have attended the summit and taken up the issue of terrorism with Pakistan bilaterally. So there is much, what shall I say, to do by way of course correction, and perhaps it is time for India to appoint a committee, multidisciplinary committee, consisting of, former civil servants, including diplomats and others, academics and others, to look at India's foreign policy till now. Where have we delivered what we wanted to deliver, where we have failed to deliver, and what are the possible course corrections required. And I would emphasize that, there is no need to tell the media that it has been appointed, and the report of that committee also need not be publicized. In diplomacy, at times, it is important to keep certain things confidential. Thank you for listening to me with undivided attention.
Thank you, Ambassador Fabian. Wonderful concluding remarks. And thank you, all the three speakers. Now we will go for question and answer. But before that, I have to make a coming Saturday's announcement, and then we go to question and answer. Faisal?
Just 1 second.
Hello. So next coming Saturday, we have Understanding Islam and Indian History by Professor Raziuddin Akhil, my name, who is a very distinguished professor of history at University of Delhi. And he usually he has written a lot of books, and his focus is on the Sufism and political Islam and political cultures. He will be joined by Professor Muqtadar Khan from University of Delaware, who is a well-known figure here in the Indian or the larger circle of political thoughts. And he will be giving the concluding remarks. And Mr. Muhammad Ayub Khan from Canada will be giving the introductory remarks. Over to Dr. Rafat Hussain for moderating the question and answer session. Rafat?
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Raziuddin. So this is a privilege for all of us that we have three ambassadors of India speaking at this forum. And my respect and sincere thanks to Ambassador Shivshankar Menon, Ambassador Ishrat Aziz Saab, and Ambassador KP Fabian Saab. Thank you, all three speakers. It was a wonderful session. So let's begin the question and answer session. And there are two options. One is you can raise your digital hand, or you put your question or comment or show your interest in the chat box. So let's begin with the chat box. There is one of them from Dr. Iram Gul. So the question or comment is, the subcontinent has witnessed continued migration from 65,000 years ago from Africa, Caucasus, Iranian, Aryans, Greeks, Sakas, Scythians, Turks, Arabs, and even British. A study reveals that there is a huge mix of all DNAs on this land. Keeping in view of these scientific facts, how can the claims of originality or purity of the race by Hindutva-like concept be justified? And how can these facts influence the foreign policy of the countries of the subcontinent? Please go ahead, Menon Saab.
Well, I think, he's absolutely right. This is why I said, if you look at the geography of the subcontinent, it's open on three sides. And people have always come and gone. The British were the only ones who came into India, into the subcontinent, and who refused to be assimilated. Everyone else before that came because the subcontinent, when the continental drift happened, when it broke away Gondwana land and moved over the Reunion and other volcanoes, the subcontinent was basically wiped clean of life during continental drift. And then all of us actually came later into the subcontinent. So he's absolutely right when he says that there's no such thing as ethnic purity and this is true not only of India, it's true across the world. This is a very 19th century European idea that you can build a nation on ethnic purity, on one language, one religion, one ethnicity, and so on. And frankly, in the subcontinent especially, it doesn't make sense. I like to say that in India, for instance, everyone is a minority by either language or by region or by caste or by religion. So this is why we have to be a democracy, because we have to negotiate everything among ourselves. And as a democracy, each minority thinks, yes, it can find other allies to deal with it. But that's why I think our basic nature in the subcontinent is plural. And attempts to try and fight that have not succeeded so far and only lead to more conflict and trouble.
Thank you, Ambassador Menon. So next question is from Ravi Sinha Saab. Mr. Ambassador, given the tectonic shift that appears to be happening in the world order, how feasible or desirable it would be for India to make a major strategic shift and adopt the idea of Primakov triangle? Is it possible and desirable to become a strategic partner to China, Russia combined?
I don't think India can enter into exclusive strategic partnerships because, frankly, there is no other country on earth with the same set of interests at the same level of development, with the same needs and the same demands of the international system as India. In many ways, therefore, India has to work with different partners for different things. When it comes to our maritime security in the Indo-Pacific, for instance, we work with those who are present in the Indo-Pacific, like the Quad, for instance. But when it comes to continental security, where our Quad partners, frankly, are absent from mainland Asia, then we work with whoever's on the continent. We work with Iran, with Russia, when possible, we work with China. So I don't see India getting into any exclusive arrangement. Yes, we do. We have had in the past, and it seems we are about to resume the India-China-Russia trilateral dialogue, which we've had in the past. I'm told we're going to start that again. But it won't be the only line of approach because of the nature of our interests.
Thank you again. Dr. Ilfat Hassan, please.
Thank you very much, Rafat. And thanks all the three speakers for great presentations. Such rational thinking, such level-headed thinking must be admired. And to Ambassador Menon, I was born in India. I was raised there, then I moved to Pakistan, and then I have lived in America for a long time. I go to India quite frequently, sir. And when I talk to my friends in India, I see a lot of cohesion, a lot of respect for each other. I'm a Muslim by birth, and most of my colleagues are Hindus, and we get along wonderfully. I see no difference. Sir, what can be done? I'm stating the obvious, but what can be done to solve this India-Pakistan problem? This hatred for each other at the political level is hurting both countries. Not only Pakistan, it's hurting India also. What can be done to bring peace to these two countries and make them friends? Because I firmly believe India cannot get its potential until Pakistan problem is solved. This is a bogey that keeps on going. The current government in India has made things much worse. I remember the days of Manmohan Singh when things were pretty good. Sir, you were at the helm of affairs. Is there any way of these two countries coming together and getting rid of these mutual hatreds? Thank you very much.
You know, I, like you, I share this view that, and this is why I mentioned that most of Pakistan, you know, there's this media image created of Pakistan is hostile to India. Most of Pakistan is not hostile to India. But there are vested interests in both polities who have an interest in hostility and who keep it going on both sides. How can we reassert the actual interest of both countries? Because otherwise we are like crabs in a bucket. We are each pulling each other down and not allowing us to realize our potential. How can we do this? I think we came close. And I still think that Dr. Manmohan Singh's formula, which is you can't change borders, but within that you can make the borders porous and let people travel, trade, mix, live with each other. And if you do that, if you can do that in South Asia, you can solve a lot of these problems. Because as you said, at the popular level, I mean, I lived in Pakistan for 3 years. Okay, it was a good time. I went as Mr. Vajpayee's hand of friendship in 2003. And I was there until 2006, and it was when the back channel was working, doing its work, and so on. You know, in December 2004, we issued something, almost 10,000 visas to Pakistani school children for homestays in India, where they came and stayed in, which means that their parents trusted their children to us, which tells you something about what, at the human level, if you can touch that level, I think you, and somehow engage that in the relationship, I think you can achieve a great deal. So I'm a former bureaucrat, a diplomat, but if we can get the state out of the relationship and concentrate on the rest of it, I think we have some hope. But ultimately, we have to influence our own governments. And until we talk sense to our own governments, how we do that, how you do it in Pakistan, how we do it in India, I mean, I know I'm asking a great deal. I really don't know.
Thank you, Ambassador. The next question is from Salman Qureshi. Can the ambassador tell us how the BRICS initiative might or might not impact relationship with China and Pakistan?
You know, I think if you look at BRICS, it's an interesting organization. It's done one or two things. It set up a new development bank. It also did some currency swap arrangements when, on COVID, when some of the currencies were under pressure. But it still has to produce outcomes. And yet, 40 countries want to join BRICS. That's a measure of how frustrated the global South is with the world situation today and with what the great powers are doing, with what the US and even what China is doing to a certain extent, but much less. And I think For me, therefore, BRICS is an organization which promises a lot. Many people want to join it, but it so far has not actually done anything outside the economic sphere successfully. Russia and China, given their present relationship with the US, would like it to become an anti-US, anti-Western club. But so far, if you look at the additional members, each of them has very tight ties with the US and the West. So I don't see it becoming a political organization or affecting the relationship between, say, India and Pakistan or India and China. Those are issues which we will have to sort out bilaterally among ourselves. But what I do see its potential, if BRICS already, if you look at BRICS GDP and the rates of growth of BRICS members, just the 10 members presently, if you just look at that, already in another 3 years, BRICS will have a greater share of world GDP than the G7. So I think it will be more and more economically, I think it has the potential to actually do something. Politically, I'm not so sure where it will go, and I don't think it'll actually affect bilateral relationships, especially complicated ones like India, Pakistan, India, China. I don't know if that answers the question or just reveals my confusion.
No, thank you much. There's another one is by the name iPhone. It's for Ambassador Menon. You said that in general, Pakistani citizens are more open to have a cordial relationship with India. How about Indians' feeling towards Pakistan in your assessment?
Well, my Pakistani friends tell me that when they come to India, they find the same thing in India. That they find the hospitality, the welcome, that it's rare to have instances of actual individual hostility or unpleasantness. I think it's a common experience of people on both sides. And whenever we've allowed travel, as we did between 2004, 2008, I think that's been the common experience on both sides.
Thank you, Ambassador. Dr. Syed Amir, please.
Thank you. I would like to thank all three speakers. Very learned talk. I want to address this little comment to Ambassador Menon. Apologize, I missed part of your talk because your voice is as gentle, I guess, as your personality is. One question which has intrigued me is India had a prime minister with BJP, which also belonged to BJP. That was Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee. And during his reign, it was amazing relationship with Pakistan. He had came to Lahore, Pakistan, and for a while it seems that the two countries were coming very close. And in fact, even now, he is one of the most popular prime minister in Pakistan. So maybe you can give some analysis what it was that made Vajpayee, although he was a BJP too, so popular and tolerant. Thank you.
Well, I can't explain what made him popular at all. But you know, Vajpayee, after he spoke in Srinagar about Insaniyat, you remember in April 2003, I was in Peking and he asked me to come to Delhi. I went to see him. And, you know, he used to speak Hindi to me. I used to speak English because why murder a good language, you know? So I used to speak English to him. And so he asked me, "Kyun Shankar, Pakistan jaoge?" So I said, "Why me? I haven't dealt with Pakistan since 1974. This is 2003. And so the only time he used English with me, he told me, "Because you are innocent." And he roared with laughter at his joke at my expense. But what he meant was serious. What he meant was, you're not carrying baggage. We're not going to repeat the same cycle that we've gone through over and over and over again. He was trying, so he was, I mean, he was fundamentally dissatisfied with the nature of the relationship, and he was willing to try new things. And that he made it quite clear. But he was convinced that it was in India's interest. And one thing about Vajpayee I found, because I dealt with him before, he was our minister for a while. He never looked at any issue that you took to him as a party political issue. His question wasn't कि इसका क्या असर होगा मेरे election पे या मेरे party का क्या होगा इसके साथ. Never. His question always used to be ये देश के हित में है कि नहीं? क्यों है? And you'd have to explain why you thought it was in the national interest. And I think that broad-mindedness that he brought, and you see it in his poetry, you see it in his approach to life also. I think that is something that you really need if we are to break out of this unsatisfactory state of our relations.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Can
Great.
I ask?
Hold on.
Jay,
Hold on. Who is that? You
can I? ये तो गायब ही हो गई।
Okay, let's move. Somebody is please mute them. Another question is from Victor Ghalib Beg, and he is asking two questions. India-Israel relations and Gaza genocide effect on the region, and US-India ties under new tariffs.
India, Israel, I mean, I cannot understand why we are silent now on what's on the murder that's going on in Gaza. I mean, I've said this before, I'll say it again. I mean, I do not understand what we are doing now, frankly. On India-US ties under the new tariffs, I think we're in the middle of a negotiation. And I'm not sure how long this is going to last, what is going to come out at the end of it. Our people say they're still negotiating the bilateral trade agreement, which they were supposed to finish by this autumn. I really don't know. I think it's too early to say. The sad thing is that there is no logic to what the US has done on tariffs. I mean, when we look at, I think Pakistan has 19%, we have 25%. Switzerland has what, 49 or something. There's really no logic. So it's very hard to predict where this is going to land and where it'll end, and whether it will last. Given, if you look at the last 5 months, every other day we have a new announcement, and some things are held in abeyance, and something is dangled in front of you as a threat. So I'm very nervous about either ascribing permanence or making any plans on the basis of what we see today, what we see and hear today on tariffs from the US.
Thank you. Sayyada Jabi Shah question. Namaste. Salam to everyone. Great speech. I am an Assamese Indian permanent resident in New York City for decades. Could our embassies use music to spread love, respect, peace among various countries? As music touches one's soul, this is Bharat Ratna, Dr. Bhupan Hazarika's centennial. And Bhupan Da was all for humanity, peace, and love. Thank you.
I agree with you entirely. We should be using music.
Thank you.
One thing that joins us all across the subcontinent.
Okay, thank you. Abdul Jabbar Sahib. Ishrat Aziz Bhai, you will be speaking in the end, or you want to ask question now? You raised hand. I know that you.
So he can go first. So I'll come later.
Ishrat Bhai, do you want to speak in the beginning, or?
I think put him in the end. Put him in because he has a long comment.
At the end, But
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. First of all, thank you, Shiv, for that very comprehensive and balanced presentation and insightful. And of course, Fabian is not there anymore, I notice, but I appreciate the clarity and force with which he spoke. My question to you, Shiv, is because I'm a great believer in a vision of economic prosperity as key to peace, even social harmony, though many people may disagree with that because they say, no, you can't have economic prosperity. You should first solve the social problem of social harmony. But looking at the people of the region, and you know the people of the region, you have been in Pakistan, you have been in Sri Lanka, and you have visited all the neighboring countries many times over. Can the vision of shared prosperity trump all these divisive feelings that persist amongst the people, or certainly among some people who try to take advantage of divisive feelings and make political gain out of that? Thank you.
Yeah, my own sense is I think it can, but you need to neutralize the polarizing forces and so on. And the only way of doing that is to simultaneously address the security issues. Because frankly, without the security, it becomes hard to do the economics. When we improved relations with Bangladesh between, say, 2010 onwards, we did both simultaneously. We not only tried to address the water problem, solve the boundary, and built, grid connections, invited Bangladesh to invest in hydropower on our side, so they had a say in the running of it, etc., started inland waterways. But we also addressed each other's security concerns, because you need to, I think, neutralize that part of it also. And it can be done easily. It can be done relatively easily. I mean, Bangladesh made sure that Indian insurgent groups no longer had sanctuary in Bangladesh. We took care of various criminal Bangladeshi elements which were operating out of India and causing trouble for them. And so, for me, it's not an either-or thing. It's something where you need to do both. And you can do both, because I think it's something that, but ultimately, once you've done the economic linkages and so on, they actually start bearing fruit. Already, I see that despite all the emotion last year and all that was said in the Indian media about Bangladesh, because Bangladesh basically is going through a revolution. Today already there is a course correction going on in that Fabian spoke of in the approach. I mean, I was asked to come and speak to the Parliamentary Standing Committee, and they had a whole session about 4 hours just on Bangladesh. And they're clearly looking for ways to get the relationship back on track. And because, not talking and so on is not a relationship. And we have too much in common that we need each other. So yes, I think economic prosperity is the key ultimately, and that's what gives a stable basis to a relationship. But you need to also fix the security parts, or at least we seem to be making progress on the security parts.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Abdul Jabbar, please.
Thank you. Thank you for a fantastic discussion today. I put my comments in the chat box. This is regarding China Belt Road Initiative. I think it's about 6 years ago, there was serious articles in Nature about that. I think I don't know what is the status now, given the changed political, geopolitical situation. So I want you to comment on that. And then, because I'm a scientist, I was trained as a PhD in Madurai Kamaraj University. I came here. Science is a driver of development. So what is the, looks like China is taking a lead. In fact, if you look at the scientific contributions for Chinese scientists, they have really superseded, they have really come, they have now number one in some measures. So clearly, science is a very important component of any national development. So I read in Indian context, it is not being given that much, a lot of meddling going on in the education system. So I think I want you to really elaborate on that within your whatever you could do. I understand you're a diplomat, you have certain constraints, what you can talk about. So I want you to elaborate on that theme. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You're absolutely right. For China, science is a big part of their future. And for Xi Jinping especially, he has stressed over and over again that if China wants to keep growing the economy, but also if she wants to address the problems of the future, because she now has a dwindling population, she has a much harder external environment in which to operate, she will have to rely on science to meet her own needs. And so the investment in science that they made is really impressive. Now, depending on who you talk to, you get different versions of, how, so if you measure how many articles, citations, patents, then China, there's no question they've done. But if you look at IPs imported and exported, China imports 6 times the IPs that she exports. So it really varies, I think, across sectors. There's some people tell you that, basic science, they're not doing, but they do applications and top layers much better. All that, I'm not qualified to judge that, quite frankly. But clearly the Chinese insistence on science being critical to their future and their understanding of that, and the investments they've made, therefore, in the universities and the research labs, and the choice of the areas in which to invest, whether it's quantum computing and it's an interesting choice because it's also a selection of those areas which have direct geopolitical and power implications for the state. And it's a different model. The role of the state, etc., is very different from other places. So it's a fantastic experiment if you think of it actually in human terms. BRI has a very small science component. And in fact, BRI itself, I think part of the problem was because it was Xi Jinping's initiative, flagship, and attached to his name, everybody jumped on the bandwagon in the beginning, after 2013, 2014, 2015. And all kinds of projects were pushed onto BRI to get funding, to get support, government support, and so on. By the second BRI forum, I think they realized that this was getting out of hand so they've actually cut back. If you look at new commitments under BRI and even under the old commitments, they've been sort of redone and reworked considerably. So much of what was said about BRI before 22 is no longer true. And even in the Pakistani case, for instance, the $62 billion, they've changed the terms and shifted some of the projects and changed what they can do. But BRI has a very small scientific component. Science, I think they handle, because I think basically they think it's too important to be left to commercial negotiation and because they really see China's future as guided by it. So you're absolutely right to point to that. In India itself, I mean, there was a time when we called scientific institutions the temples of future India, etc. I think I can only speak of what I see. I mean, my students in university, the respect for science is actually as much, if not more, than it was when I was a student. And the best students still choose scientific careers. but there's much less, I find, maybe it's good or bad, but there's less who are willing to devote their life to basic science. There's a lot of applications, there's a lot of technology rather than science, as it were. And that is unfortunate, I think. In some ways, the whole digitization and the IT revolution has done this to us. And it's also skewed the economic incentive system within the scientific community. But when I talk to, I spent 7 years of my life working with atomic energy, actually in the department. And when I talk to my colleagues from atomic energy, they tell me that the quality of the intake is actually better than it's ever been. They still have more people who are interested both in atomic energy and science, in space, and so on. So I don't think there's a crisis yet, but you don't know, 10, 15 years from now, if we go on like this, I think there will be.
Thank you. Great.
Imtiaz Saab.
Thank you for taking my call. Ambassador Menon, you mentioned that former Prime Minister Vajpayee thought first in terms of national interest, not his personal political or party interest. That to me represented a different brand of BJP ideology. Present leadership, especially since 2002, have a different way of looking, gripping the power. And as Amit Shah has mentioned and others, that 80-20 formula requires polarization of Indian polity on communal lines. So do you see any possibility or any sign that under the pressure of unemployment and poverty, the BJP may want to go back to the kind of thinking which Vajpayee represented?
I really cannot predict what the BJP will do, where they will go, how they will evolve. I don't think many people saw them evolving in this direction, and I'm not really sure where they'll be in another 3-5 years.
Thank you. The last question is from Dr. Iltifat again.
Thank you, Rafat, for allowing me to ask another question. Ambassador Menon, you were in Pakistan for 3 years, and the best 3 years, I think, in the existence of India and Pakistan in terms of relations. Are you planning, sir, on writing a book on those experiences so we can all learn from it? There were some good things that were happening at that time.
There were very good things. You're right.
So from you, sir, will be, I think, deeply appreciated by everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for the suggestion. I'll try, but I'm already overcommitted, I think. But certainly, I'll think about it. I'll try.
I'm sorry, I was on mute. So I am told by Dr. Raziuddin that Dr. Zoya Hassan or Professor Zoya Hassan is in the audience and she wants to ask a question. I don't see her in the list, but please go ahead, Professor Hassan.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you very much for a really wonderful talk. I have 3 very brief questions. You mentioned in the beginning that there are structural reasons why India's relations are what they are in the neighborhood. And you mentioned that China is the elephant in the room. But I was wondering whether when we're talking of the structural reasons, whether China is the only elephant in the room or the US is also, the United States is also an elephant in the room. Now, as you hinted, I mean, it's clear that China has deep pockets, which has helped it to expand its influence in South Asia, whereas India takes its neighbors for granted. And I think that is part of the problem. And the souring in the relationship with Bangladesh is clearly an example of how you take a neighbor for granted. secondly, to come back to my point about the second elephant in the room, I was a little surprised, and I'm wondering why the United States did not really figure in your talk, given the fact that India is so closely aligned with the United States now, and we are watching the drama that has been going on ever since Donald Trump took over the presidency. I mean, India seems to have, for a long time, of course, preceding this government, seems to have, and more so after this government came to power, seems to have put all its eggs in the American basket. And wouldn't you think that that is also a factor affecting, as it were, the India's relationship or attitude towards its neighbors? Because it seems now India considers its part to be in the big league, and that it's part of the Western alliance and in that big club. And therefore, South Asia is not quite something that it is particularly concerned with. And thirdly, and very importantly, I mean, there's been so much discussion, and I can't think of a better person than you to reflect on this, that there's been, for the first time, a great deal of public discussion and public debate on our foreign policy. And of course, the emerging consensus is that Indian foreign policy has been a failure, especially in the context of Operation Sindoor and all of, and so on. So but there is no doubt that Indian foreign policy has come under huge strain in the recent past. And for the first time, I'm of course no expert, but I do, sort of observe and read about foreign policy. For the first time, it seems that the consensus that we talk so much about on foreign policy has broken down. And clearly, I think just the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha debate in the last 2 days is an indication of this. So I'm wondering whether you might reflect on whether you would agree that the consensus on foreign policy has broken down. If so, why? If I may hazard my argument, I think one of the reasons why it has broken down is that perhaps domestic politics, more than ever before, is driving India's foreign policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's a lot to unwrap. You said 3 simple questions. To start with the US.
Yeah.
For China, South Asia matters much more than it does. It matters much more for China than it does for the US, because South Asia is part of their periphery. For the US, it's the other side of the world. It mattered even during the Cold War. It was not just a secondary, it was maybe a tertiary theater. And the primary was Europe. But if you look at the rest of maritime Asia, most of it, Vietnam, Korea, etc. So the US interest and frankly involvement in South Asia, even though we like to flatter ourselves and we see a foreign hand behind every bush, but frankly, in actual practice, the US interest is much more limited, and their willingness to get involved and actually do anything is also very limited. And this is not new. If you think of 1965, the US told the Soviets, you deal with them. We can't be bothered with these fellows. And they left, Tashkent. And this is actually, it's consistent. India's policy in South Asia, I cannot think of a single case where it's actually affected or influenced by India-US relations.
Not even the India-US-China equation, which is so complicated.
I don't see that. India's problems with China are not because of the US.
Yeah, no, that's true.
Problems with China predate, and frankly, India's had good relations with China when she had bad relations with the US, when she had good relations with the US. These two are independent if you look at them over the last 75 years. India-China relations are pretty sui generis, actually, if you look at it. So for me, to talk of a Western alliance and so on affecting what India does in the neighborhood, no. India has always been relatively realist in the neighborhood and has always been accused of actually interfering and so on by the neighbors. Sometimes rightly, sometimes wrongly. Exactly what you said, overbearing, taking people for granted, all these things neighbors say. But that I take as normal. It happens between India and the neighbors, it happens between China and her neighbors, it happens between that's normal. But I wouldn't equate the US with China and their interest and what they do in South Asia. I wouldn't equate that because I think there is a fundamental difference. On Bangladesh, yes, I don't think it's so much taking Bangladesh for granted as underestimating the fact that Bangladesh was about to undergo a revolution. And I think it's still going on, and nobody can predict a revolution. We don't know which way it's going to go. On public debate on foreign policy, I think memories are short. If you read some of the debates in the Indian Parliament on China policy between 1959 and 62, and what was said by Nathpai and the others about Nehru and his policy, or if you read the parliamentary debates on Pakistan, after Sharm el-Sheikh, for instance, or even earlier, it's we have this myth that we tell ourselves that we've always had consensus on foreign policy. When we've had consensus, it has been something that we've worked at and built, and we worked very hard on it. I remember when we were negotiating in 1992, when we were negotiating the Border Peace and Tranquility Agreement with China, Narasimha told me, go and talk to the following 6 people every month about your negotiation. And I said, but I have nothing. I don't have an agreement with the Chinese. I don't know where this is going. He said, no, go and talk to them. And his list was Advani, Vajpayee, all his political opponents. So I would go and ask them, what do you think we should do? And then I would tell them also some of what we were doing with the Chinese, how far we got. So that when we finally signed that agreement, accepting the status quo legally, not a squeak in Parliament, no debate. But that consensus didn't come naturally and would not come. And so I'm not sure that consensus is broken. In fact, it's a good thing when there's an argument in Parliament and policy like Sindoor. After Sindoor happens, people should question the official narrative and see whether what's right or wrong. To the extent you are absolutely right that domestic politics is driving foreign policy decisions much more than ever before. I mean, others can't explain, Bangladesh is being called termites and so on. All that is domestic political consumption in the heat of an election somewhere. And there's no question that those things, frankly, shouldn't happen. But so there, I think you're absolutely right. But I don't think we should assume that there used to be a golden age of Indian foreign policy when everybody agreed. I'm not sure that ever was or will be the case. And I'm not sure that democracy it should be also. I mean, when you all start thinking alike is when you should start worrying.
Thank you.
But wouldn't you say that at least on Palestine, there's such a marked shift in Indian foreign policy?
That is, as I said, I mean, it's something I don't understand, but I don't know whether it's done because of the US or it's done of their own reasons and convictions.
So
and
that is because of their own reasons. Yeah, you're right.
So I'm a bit nervous to draw those kinds of conclusions that, oh, it's because of the US, this happened, that happened. I think I think people use the US, even China now, in order to escape their own responsibility. I mean, we're grown-ups now, right? 75 years, we should take responsibility for what we do.
Thank you, Ishrat.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Rafsar, can I ask a brief question?
Bob, be quick because we have been.
Yeah, I know. It's so. What is that? The Kashmiri question. Can you talk about a little bit?
Oh, that's a big topic.
That's a long question.
I
That's
know.
another PhD.
Yeah, so let's
Mhm.
That's
not.
fine. I think it's, I'm not from Kashmir. I'm very sentimentally attached to it because I have very close friends from Kashmir. So in fact, I visited the Srinagar 2 years ago. I spent a week there. So that is my attachment to it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, and before I invite Ishrataji Saab because he wants to say something, can I ask a question not related to the diplomacy? So, you being a bureaucrat, what would you suggest to the government how to handle or get rid or minimize the corruption in India? I know there is no magic bullet, but at least if you were there in a chair and the government is asking you to suggest some points, what would be the 1 or 2 points?
Well, I have 3 points, some very simple points. One is things should be priced at their real price. Because in many cases, corruption is actually, if you're providing a service and you're not providing enough of the service, then its price goes up. The difference is normally a bribe. So first, price things right. Secondly, you must be consistent in your punishments and in your rewards. Reward well, but certainly then punish also well. And for me, that I don't see any other way of dealing with this. But I think the real problem with corruption is that it has a way of entrenching itself and creating vested interests, which then actually feed into the political system. So that, I think, is the part that's the hardest to fix. But corruption, the bureaucracy, petty corruption, I think there's a very interesting analysis of corruption in China by Yuan Wenang, where she distinguishes between petty corruption for daily services and so on, and other forms of bribery and various forms. The highest form of corruption, of course, is influencing government policy in your favor and getting government. And she argues that actually, if you can eliminate petty corruption and the lower forms of corruption, the highest form of corruption sometimes works, as it worked in China. Xi Jinping is still fighting corruption, but it did help growth and it did create wealth.
It's a minimum.
So now, by definition, we would all say corruption is bad, right? And corruption actually stifles growth. And that is true of most forms of corruption. But that highest form of corruption, if you want to eliminate, I think is very, very difficult.
It's almost impossible, like in the US. Thank you so much. Bye. Is he still there or?
Yes, I'm there.
Okay, please.
Get the
Final comment.
Yes, actually, I'm not going to say anything new, but I will emphasize something, and it is that the vision of shared prosperity can be used to overcome so many challenges that diplomacy faces. Europe is an example, EU is an example. The guiding principle, to my mind, the what you would call the cornerstone of India's neighborhood policy should be peace and stability in Southeast Asia through economic cooperation and shared prosperity. Without strong ties with its neighbors, India cannot achieve global stature commensurate with the size of its population. To promote economic cooperation, India needs economic strength of its own. That can only come from an annual growth rate of 9 to 10%, inclusive of growth rate for 10 to 15 years. To achieve this, it must have internal social unity and harmony. only with a united and motivated nation of 1.4 billion people this goal can be achieved. With economic strength, India can link the countries of the region for everyone's shared prosperity. As the country with the largest economy in South Asia, India has its hand on the first gear. Without such a wise and far-sighted strategy, clever short-term tactical moves and winning debating points will achieve little. The slogan should be 7 countries with a common destiny. And I think for this purpose, one concrete thing that can be done is to have an institute in India which should do studies about the benefits of peace and cooperation in the region, as well as the losses that all the countries are going through. I think that can create the necessary public opinion at the level of those who think and who take interest in these matters, to finally it's becoming a common narrative, something in which everybody gets involved and interested.
Thank you, Sharad bhai. So, Mr. Menon, do you want to make comments on that, or you just?
I think I've said more than enough. I'll just say I agree entirely with Ambassador Aziz.
Okay, so that concludes the question and answer session. And thank you once again, both the speakers present and of course, Ambassador Fabian. And so I hand over to Dr. Raziuddin for his final remark, or if he has a question.
No remarks, just one question. In explaining this relationship, people-to-people relationship between Pakistan and India, and we also have the same observation that most people have no really any reservations. Mostly they are fine. Even in the diaspora also we see in the crowds, they mingle and they share many things, and there is a warmth. So when there is so much sort of friendliness, it is there. So how come the political dispensation or the political parties at the government level, how do they able to manipulate these things? Why there is no popular outcry when they want peace or they want to live? Is there any observation that we want to live in peace and friendliness and all those, but if the politics is going on both sides, then we don't want to interfere? Why there is no popular outcry or pressure to really change the status quo? There's no will, or there's no strong will enough to do anything, or you don't feel like there is not enough strong will to have more porous borders or more federation type situation, or no urge, no will, nothing? I'm just asking or curious to us.
I think sadly it's easier to arouse people's emotions with an enemy, with war, with look at us. There are departments of war studies across universities. How many? Can you name any department of peace studies?
Yeah, that's true.
Tells you something about our mental state, right? About what interests us. It's sad. But I wish I had a good explanation. In fact, I think if we solved that, we could solve a lot of our problems. Maybe because
Yeah, that's true. Is there anything or your personal opinion that you observe between the two people or the countries that there is fundamentally something bothering? I mean, in spite of a friendly apparent relationship, deep there is something which really is bothering each other or unresolved certain thing. I'm not going in Kashmir. I'm not talking about Kashmir. I mean, there is something more fundamentally deeper, which really is not making both nations, peoples to rise up and say that enough. We don't want to be fooled by you guys to not to be one.
I don't know.
Did
I
you?
suppose we are still at a stage where people are much more bothered with more basic things, roti, kapda, makan. We are still
And easily can be fooled by the government.
fooled so much as distracted.
Distracted,
I
probably.
think